What's up, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast with me, James. This is our fourth episode, so we're going to get things running. We're going to go straight into it this week. As you guys know, who have been listening to my previous free podcast, we're going to be talking about the upcoming UFC event from a betting perspective. So it's UFC Vegas 22 this week, and we have Kevin Holland taking on Derek Brunson in a pretty solid main event. I'm excited for that fight. I'm excited to watch that fight, and I'm excited to talk about that fight. So I'll be talking about that at the end of the podcast. But for now, we're going to start with the most exciting fight on the card, or what I think is the most exciting fight on the card. After that, I'll be talking about the most inaccurate betting line on the card. And then finally, I will touch on the main event from a betting perspective at the end. But first, we'll talk about the most exciting fight. Now, this is always a hard decision that I have to make. Every single week I come on here and I do this podcast, I have to decide what I think is the most exciting fight on the card, right? It's always hard, because the UFC put on stellar cards almost every week. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Maybe I'm just a bit of a diehard fan, but I do enjoy most UFC cards. I do think there are some weeks where they're a little bit lacking, but even then, a lot of times them cards come through with high action. And I don't think it's going to be any different here, right? This card is a banger. Let me tell you this card is a banger. And even if some of the fights are not necessarily bangers, I think they're going to be very solid performances from fighters. And just putting all that aside, I think it's going to be a pretty solid card from top to bottom. So again, like most weeks, it was hard for me to decide what the most exciting fight is going to be on this card. Now, for anybody watching live, I will bring up my screen now, and you will also be able to see what I'm seeing, which is the whole card. And, I'll just touch on a couple of the fights that didn't make the cut, because obviously I only had to choose one most exciting fight. So the first fight on the card, that almost made the cut. And, it does seem to be that the UFC do this often, where the first fight on the card, they'll make it a banger of a fight, because they know, right, that, it's going to start the card off right. I guess it may hype up some of the other fighters on the card to get finishes if that fight finishes in a finish. And it sets the tone right for the rest of the night, and it gets the people watching at home excited for the rest of the card, right? The people watching at home will probably text their friends, yo, we just saw a crazy knockout, the first fight turned the UFC on. It's just good to start the card off with a good fight, right? And that's what they've done here. JP Byers versus Bruno Silva. This is a super solid fight, man. This fight could be the most exciting fight on the card, but I didn't pick it. This is probably one of the most obvious ones to pick, but I didn't pick it. Other than that, just scrolling up the card, we've got Montel Jackson versus Jesse Strada. That's going to be a good fight. I think Jesse Strada's a huge underdog, one of the biggest underdogs in recent memories, like plus 500 on most bookies, but he's definitely going to come and bring it. And, I expect Montel Jackson to do his thing there and, justify, or at least try to justify that minus 700 line we've got on him. We've got Cheyenne Bays. She put on a solid performance in the Contender Series. I'm not too interested in that fight that she has with Montserrat Ruiz, though. We've got Adriana versus Gustavo Lopez. I believe that's going to be a very solid fight. Two guys who were on the same regional scene, and they're coming up against each other now. I thought we might see them on the regional scene, but we're seeing them in the UFC under the bright lights. Someone's going to shine there. Someone's going to sink. Or maybe it's going to be an even fight back and forth. We've got Tai Tuivasa. All of his fights, a lot of the time anyway, are exciting. They finish early. Harry Hunsucker, I believe, has never been out the first round, or it's never been over 1.5 rounds. One of them two, which is pretty funny. So I'm sure that's going to be a banger. Gregor Gillespie versus Brad Riddell. I mean, I could go on forever. That's going to be a good fight. Brunson versus Holland, the main event. We'll touch on that. But I will now tell you the fight I actually chose for this week's most exciting fight. And that is Grant Dawson versus Leonardo Santos. This fight is going to be an absolute banger, guys. So we've got Grant Dawson, who's a pretty solid prospect in the featherweight division, but he is moving up to lightweight as he has missed his last two featherweight bouts. He's missed weight, I should say, by about 5 pounds or so. I don't remember the exact amount he missed by, but he's moving up to lightweight here. And obviously, because of them consecutive weight misses, I believe it's a good move for him. He was obviously killing himself to get to that weight. And, we may even see a better Grant Dawson here. A lot of times fighters are moving up in weight, down in weight. It happens almost every week. Someone's making a move in weight class. And a lot of the time, I think most of the time, I would say it probably, or I think that it probably goes against them in some way. I mean, it's a new weight class. You can take some time to adapt to that weight class. Even if it is going to be a good decision for you long term, sometimes it may take a fight or two for your body to get used to fighting at that weight, for you to, if you're going down in weight class, for you to master that cut. If you're going up in that weight class, for you to understand how to use your skills against bigger bodies. There's just more variables if you're changing weight class. So most of the time, I do think I'll probably lean on the side to say that it probably hinders people who are moving weight class, But in this case, you have to take things on a case-by-case basis, of course. And in this case, I believe it's probably going to help Grant Dawson. So Grant Dawson's looked pretty solid inside of the octagon, in my opinion. And moving up in weight class, I think it's going to benefit him here. And he's taking on Leonardo Santos, who is, one of the MMA hardcore community's favorite fighters. He's a come forward fighter. He's always going to put on exciting fights. And he's actually unbeaten in something crazy like 10 fights or like 9 years, I believe. And what I'll do is I'll bring his record up here and I'll tell you exactly how long he is unbeaten for. So first of all, before even looking at his record, he's never been beat in the UFC, guys. This guy is undefeated in the UFC octagon. He's got knockouts over Kevin Lee, Stevie Ray. And as I said, he's undefeated. So you're probably thinking, if you haven't heard of this dude before, which a lot of people won't if you're not super hardcore MMA, you'll be thinking, man, why hasn't this guy fought for a title yet, Well, one of the reasons is he's 41 years old. I just check his Tapology record. Yeah, he is. He's 41 years old. So, he's past his prime now, but he's definitely one of the fighters who is aging like wine and not aging like milk. A couple of fighters, I could say that, but I don't want to be disrespectful. But yeah, he's aging like wine, Santos. He looks good every time out. But he is 41 years old, and, we have to admit he is not in his prime anymore. Nobody at 41 years old is in their prime. Except Andrei Arlovski, maybe. Even with that, I am joking. Andrei Arlovski obviously was better when he was younger, but he's been around the block for a while and he's had to change his styles. Anyway, back to Leonardo Santos. So not only is he old, he's had long periods out of the UFC's octagon. You will see on his record here that he fought Adriana Martins in 2016, and then his next fight wasn't until 2019. But he did have bouts scheduled in 2017 and 2018 that were cancelled. Now, I'm not exactly sure why they were cancelled, but if we just bring up the Tapology record here, it should show us. So his bout that was scheduled in 2017 was cancelled because his opponent pulled out via injury. And then his bout in 2018, he pulled out with an injury. So, that's 2 years on the sidelines there. And then he didn't fight to the year after. So it would actually mark 3 years since his last fight. But he came back in terrifying fashion. He knocked out Stevie Ray with his famous straight right, I should say. He knocked out Stevie Ray with his famous straight right. That's a bit of a tongue twister there. Knocked out Stevie Ray with his famous straight right. You try to do that at home. It's not too easy, right? So don't make fun of me. Anyway, yeah, he came back with devastating fashion. First round knockout. And then we didn't see him again till another year later. I don't really know what it is with this guy. But we saw him against Roman Bogotov last year. And that was his last time out. And, that was one of the fights where I watched it and I thought, because there's a lot of hype around this dude, Leonardo Santos, right? He's never been defeated in the UFC's octagon. He came back after 3 years out and knocked out Stevie Ray, who's a decent opponent, with one punch in the first round, 2 minutes into the fight. And so there was a lot of hype around him. Against Bogotov, he did well. He almost had Bogotov out of there, I will say. But he showed that, he has flaws. So When he fought Bogatov, we'll just talk about his last fight a little bit. He fought Bogatov. He won the first 2 rounds clearly. And in that second round, I believe it was, he hit Bogatov with like 4 straight rights in a row. Not street rights or whatever I said before. He hit him with 4 straight rights in a row and had him on Queer Street. You know, he had him in all sorts of trouble, and he almost stopped Roman Bogatov, who was a 10-0 fighter at the time coming into that fight. But all his fights were on the regional scene, and I don't think he's that high level, right? To be honest, the cat's out of the bag after that fight in the UFC, but I don't think Bogatov is very high level. Anyway, he almost got stopped by Santos, but in the 3rd round, Santos dramatically faded, right? So throughout his whole career, his cardio has been the one thing to let him down. You know, he's gone to split decisions before. He's had draws before. And one of the flaws you can point out in his game is that his cardio isn't the best. He starts to slow down in that 2nd round. And in that 3rd round, he's gassed. But I will give it to him. He does fight through. As I said, he's never been beaten in the UFC's octagon. So, you know, he knows how to fight through. He's only got 3 losses on his record. And if I just go through his record and tell you what his 3 losses are, they were against Santiago Ponzinibbio, you know, who's a very credible fighter. There's nothing wrong with losing to him. And then there's a fight he lost on, his 8th fight. And that was a split decision. So that's not a bad thing. And then, you know, he lost his second, or he lost his debut against Takanori Gomi, who was 10-0 at the time. Takanori Gomi is not no one to be sniffed at, a bit of a legend in the game, and he had to make his debut against him and only lost a majority decision there. I haven't seen that fight, but, you know, a majority decision on your debut against Takanori Gomi, you know this guy's got some skills, you know. And then he lost against Gene Silva. So that's like, I mean, that looks like 4 losses there. So I don't know why Tapology is saying 3 losses. But anyway, he hasn't got many losses, and his losses are to good guys. And one of them's a split, and one of them's a majority decision. So, I mean, this guy just, he hardly gets blown away, right? He doesn't get blown out of the water. So he's a very solid fighter, right? And I think he's definitely got a chance in this fight. Again, I mean, he's never been beat. So, you know, in the UFC's octagon. So I'm definitely giving him a chance in this fight. But I am definitely leaning to his opponent to win this fight quite a bit. Right, so he's fighting Grant Dawson here. And Grant Dawson, just like Leonardo Santos, has a good record. He's 16-1-0. And yeah, he's only had 1 loss in his whole career. And that was to a fighter named Hugh Pully back in 2016. And he lost 30 seconds into the fight. I believe he's going for a takedown in that fight. And when he shot him for a takedown, he just got smashed with elbows and he just got caught cold, you know, like anyone. It can happen to anyone, right? We saw it happen not last week, but last week a fighter fought and he had been knocked out. Oh, yes, Ryan Spann. You know, he'd been knocked out going for takedowns by elbows twice before. So that knockout is, I'm not going to say common. Obviously, it's not a common knockout. But it's common for being an uncommon knockout. So we do see it a lot, right? It doesn't happen a lot because it's such a specific thing. Someone shooting for a takedown and getting hit with elbows. But, you know, we've seen that enough times now to know that them elbows, if they land on the temple, the side of their head, when the fighter is shooting in, they can put your lights out. And, you know, they put Grant Dawson's lights out here. But other than that, he's undefeated. You know, he's fought in the UFC many, many times now. He's got 4 fights in the UFC. He's got 1 fight on the Dana White's Contender Series. So 5 fights under the UFC banner, let's say, or under the banner of the UFC, and 4 fights with them were obviously official. So Grant Dawson's another solid fighter. Both of these fighters have never lost in the UFC octagon, but someone's going to lose this weekend, right? Unless it's a draw, but that's unlikely. And Grant Dawson, he's got a different style, right? Santos has a striking style, but he's a world champion jiu-jitsu player. One of the best jiu-jitsu players we have in the whole of MMA, right? But he doesn't really use it that much. He just loves using his striking. I mean, the fights I've seen of him, he doesn't try and get the fight to the ground. He just strikes with the guys because he's got very good striking, right? But on the other hand, we've got Grant Dawson, who is not like that. Grant Dawson is a wrestler through and through. He's a grinder. He wants to get you to the floor, wear you out, and submit you. You know, he's a grinder. And the reason I'm leaning towards Grant Dawson in this fight is because he is a grinder. You know, we've got a grinder going up against a gasser, right? And obviously, it's not that simple. So there's so many variables that go into this matchup. But just talking about the cardio aspect of the fight, Grant Dawson is a grinder. He does not run out of cardio. He will go all 3 rounds. He will try and finish you to the bell. And then we've got Leonardo Santos, when we're talking about his cardio. He starts fast, but he fades hard, man. He starts fast and fades hard, you know. So that's a huge clash of styles there in regards to the cardio. And I very rarely back someone who gasses out. And I extremely rarely back someone who gasses out against someone who doesn't gas out and who pushes a pace. And that's what Grant Dawson does here, you know. So throwing everything else out of the window, I'm leaning Grant Dawson just because of that. Now, let's just break them down skill for skill, style for style, right? I've broke down the cardio edge. And I won't spend too much longer on this fight, but I've broke down the cardio edge. Now, in regards to the striking, I'm definitely favoring Santos on the feet, right? Santos can pick him apart at range. He can land that straight right. Grant Dawson is open to being hit on the feet. I've watched a lot of Grant Dawson's fights, and he gets hurt and he gets hit a lot in his fights. If that happens against Santos here, it could be game over, right? But it just seems that Grant Dawson knows how to push through, and you know that gives credence to his wrestling grinding style. If he does get hit, if he does get hurt, he manages to turn the tables and he manages to get stoppages of his own. You know, he's not even getting decisions a lot of the time. He's getting stoppages. We look on his record here. Yeah, he did get a decision last time out, but his 2 fights before that, he got finishes inside the UFC octagon, and they were both in the second round, and they were both by rear naked chokes. Fight before that, he went to decision, but his fight before that, he got another rear naked choke in the second round. So, you know, this guy, he definitely pushes a pace, and he definitely tries to get you out of there. If you look at most of his fights before the UFC on the regional scene, almost every single one of them are finishes, are win finishes. And then if you want to look at his amateur record, every single time he fought, he won. And he actually won by submission every single time. The only time he lost the amateur fight, he lost by decision. So, you know, this guy is a finisher, and he does try to get you out of there by that relentless wrestling pressure. And I don't think it's going to be any different when he comes up against Leonardo Santos. As I said, I favor Santos on the feet, but, you know, Grant Dawson's got a couple tricks up his sleeve on the feet, or should I say tricks up his shorts, because what he does is he throws that knee up the middle, kind of like a flying knee. He throws it not only so it can hit you, but also so he can get close to you to take you down and grind on you, right? So it's kind of like a double whammy, 2 birds with 1 stone. If he hits you with the knee, you're going to be hurt, and I've seen him hurt people with that knee before. And if he doesn't hit you, he's probably going to be close to you and he can grab you. Now, he does have to watch it, because if he comes up with that knee through the middle, Leonardo dos Santos may not be there. He may evade, and he may strike him with that straight right. So I do think it could be hairy for Grant Dawson. And of course, Santos has never been defeated in the UFC. He's definitely live to win here. He's definitely live to even get the knockout or even the submission. So now we go to the wrestling and talk about the grappling, right? So the wrestling advantage is hugely on Grant Dawson's side, but the jiu-jitsu advantage is hugely on Leonardo Santos' side. So, you know, it's that traditional matchup between a wrestler and a BJJ fighter. And most people say the wrestler wins that fight, right? But I don't think it's as clear-cut as most people say, that the wrestler, you know, has the advantage in the grappling. People say that a wrestler can usually take the fight to the ground and he can usually stay out of danger. But I don't know about that, man. I've seen a lot of wrestlers take fighters down and get subbed, you know, like it happens a lot. If the fight's on the ground, there's always that chance for a submission, you know. I remember the Gracie that fought Rory McDonald in Bellator. What's his name? Is it? Oh, I forgot his name. Maybe someone in the chat will know, but he fought John Fitch, right? John Fitch grinding on him. He subbed John Fitch. Even Kevin Lee, when he fought Tony Ferguson, right? Kevin Lee was dominating with the grappling, but he got caught in a triangle choke. You know, I remember Khabib's cousin, is it, or his brother, Abubakar Nurmagomedov, getting caught in a triangle choke by a striker in David Zawada. So, you know, obviously these are just random events I'm picking off the top of my head. We can definitely talk about a lot of other events where wrestlers have won. I mean, Khabib, anytime he's fought anyone, I guess, but he hasn't fought the high-level jiu-jitsu guys. But I guess Tony Gravely fought Freitas recently, who's a good jiu-jitsu player, and he won that fight. So look, it can go back and forth. But what I mean is that I don't think it's clear cut that if a wrestler's fighting a jiu-jitsu fighter, you should favor the wrestler pretty heavily, because I do think that narrative is a little bit overblown. And at the end of the day, if the fight's on the floor, if the guy's got a solid guard, the jiu-jitsu player, because a lot of jiu-jitsu players, are just good from top position. They're not the best from the ground. There's always a chance for them to snatch up a submission, and that's going to be the same here, right? Grant Dawson is definitely going to get takedowns in this fight, although Santos does have really good takedown defense. It only lasts for one round. So if Grant Dawson doesn't get knocked out in that first round, and I'll conclude the fight here. If Grant Dawson doesn't get knocked out in that first round, I believe he's going to take over this fight, and he's going to be able to get takedowns pretty easily against Leonardo Santos, right? Which is a big thing to say, because I do respect Santos's grappling takedown defense. But if he does take him down, which I believe he will in that second round, if he isn't out of there, he's going to be able to, put pressure, heavy top pressure on Santos. Now, as I just said, Santos is always live for that sub if the fight is in grappling realm, which it will be if Grant Dawson can have his way. But I just believe Grant Dawson is going to be defensively responsible. He won't get tapped out, and I do think he's actually going to end up finding a finish and snapping Leonardo Santos's 9-year unbeaten streak and his all-time UFC unbeaten record. And I believe Grant Dawson is going to get the stoppage in rounds 2 or round 3. So my final prediction for this fight is going to be Grant Dawson to defeat Leonardo Santos via TKO in round 3 via ground and pound. And that concludes my most excited fight of the evening. I think that's going to be an unbelievable fight. It could go either way. And, I really can't wait for that fight. It could be my most anticipated matchup of the evening, So there we go. I'll take a sip of my tea. And then we will get on to the most inaccurate betting line on the card. Now, this one's always kind of hard for me to decide, right? And the reason why that is because when I put this podcast out, a lot of times it's closer to fight time, right? So at the moment where I live in New Zealand, it's Friday, right? So it's going to be Thursday for a lot of you guys watching this podcast, because we are, ahead of most of the world, if not almost all of the world. So I put the podcast out pretty close to fight time, right? Which means that a lot of the betting lines, or most of the betting lines, have been steamed, for the past few weeks. And what that means is the line, the market has had a time to correct itself, right? So when I come on here, I have things in my mind earlier in the week, what the most inaccurate line is going to be. But when it comes time to making the podcast, the inaccurate line is not very inaccurate anymore. So I will say that I might actually start putting this podcast out a little bit earlier, for a couple of reasons. Obviously for that reason, so the lines are, not as steamed as much, but then also so you guys have some content earlier in the week, because I know a lot of people do like to ingest content, beginning of the week to get them hyped up. So that's just something in store for the future. I'll probably be putting this podcast out a lot sooner than I have been in the last few weeks. But anyway, back to the most inaccurate line on the card. As I say, not as easy to find it on a Friday, but the one I have picked here, and I'm not going to say it's hugely inaccurate, but I'll break down the mathematics of how inaccurate it is in a minute. But the bet is, or the line is, it's Max Griffin to defeat Kinon Song via decision. Now, at the moment, what I'll do is I'll bring up bestfightodds.com. And for those of you who don't know, it's the best place to go for UFC and MMA props. And what I'll do is I'll just zoom in to Max Griffin and Kinon Song's fight, which is right here. And if we just check the current betting line for this, it should be what I saw it at earlier, which was, it was a little bit off in my opinion. I think the line should be a little bit closer. So if we find Max Griffin to win via decision, right, Griffin to win via decision here. Okay, so you can see where my cursor is, but if not, anyone listening at home, Max Griffin to win via decision at the moment is plus 110, right? It's plus 115 on free bookies. That's the best price you can get. But we'll just say it's plus 110, right? Just for the sake of argument. There's 3 plus 110s, 3 plus 115s, and 1 plus 100 on bestfightodds.com, right? So I think this line is a little bit off, right? So what I mean by the line is off, I don't just look at the line and say, oh, that line should be different. I do that, but what I do is I break down exactly what this line means. So plus 115 behind that has an implied probability, right? So if you don't know what implied probability means in sports betting, it basically means that any line you ever see, right? And when say line, I mean odds, right? Any odds you ever see, it has an implied probability behind that odd. So it's a percentage of a probability of how often that outcome will happen, right? So just for argument's sake, just to make it simple, plus 100, right, is even money. Okay. So if that was in fractional odds, it will be 1-1. And yeah, plus 100 is even money. And that means that the bookies believe that this is going to happen 50% of the time. That's what plus 100 means, right? It's even money. So it's 1-1. So the bookies think that 50% of the time, this is what the outcome will be, right? And every odds range has a different implied probability, right? So if you get an odds range of minus 233, that means that the bookies believe there's a 70% chance of this happening. And all you need to do is type in probability calculator on Google, and you type in your odds range, and you will get the implied probability. And what I'll do is I'll actually give you a app on the iPhone, and you might be able to download it on Android as well. And that's what I use. It's called Odds Calculator, right? And what you do, you just type in the money line, you type in whatever odds you have, and then it will actually tell you the exact percentage. So it's really easy. You know, you can have it in your pocket, and after a while, you will just get to know what different odds mean, right? Now, when I'm looking for inefficiencies in the betting markets, and that's exactly what you need to do, right? You need to look for inefficiencies and in the betting markets, and then take advantage of them inefficiencies, right? You can't just bet on who you think is going to win or your favorite fighter or none of that bullshit, right? What you want to do is treat this like investing in stocks. You need to be thinking that a fighter or a specific prop bet or something, you need to think of that as a stock, and you need to think of that as you are investing in that stock. I mean, you just need to look on the screen now and look at the board. This board looks kind of like a stock board, right? It's got like all different numbers on it. That's a market, and we need to take advantage of this market's inefficiencies, right? So a little bit of a rant there, but, you know, I just wanted to get that clear because sometimes, you know, people don't really understand the nuances behind sports betting, but that's a real simple aspect of it that you have to understand if you want to make money long term, because believe me, if you don't understand this, you won't make money long term. So anyway, I looked at this bet, right? Max Griffin to win via decision. And I saw plus 115, plus 110. And I thought that line's off, you know, that implied probability is not enough. So plus 110 is implying a probability of a 47% chance, right? So basically the bookies think that Max Griffin wins by decision 47% of the time. If this fight happens 100 times, they think he's going to win by decision 47 times. And I have to lean more. I have to say that more than half the time, Max Griffin is going to win via decision. I think that Max Griffin probably wins this fight by decision about 55% of the time, right? So me personally, I'm saying 55% this happens, but the bookies are saying 47% this happens. And they're giving me odds of 47% that this is going to happen. So because I think there's a 55% chance, that is what? That's 8% chance. I think I'm getting an 8% better chance than the bookies are offering me. So it's an instant bet for me, right? And I have bet this, but actually I got in at a better line. So I send all my bets out to my members as soon as I bet them myself, if the lines are widely available on different bookmakers. And I actually jumped in on this bet when it was at plus 130, right? So I'm getting a much bigger edge than I would be getting now. Not much bigger, but a solid 5% more than I would be getting if I was to make this bet now. But I still think that this has value on the line, and I still think this is an inaccurate line. So let's go into the fight. And I won't spend super long on this fight because I'm not super interested in this fight. And I don't think there's too many aspects to it. But I obviously will tell you why I think Max Griffin is going to win via decision, or at least why I think Max Griffin is going to win by decision 55% of the time. So Max Griffin has fought at a lot of high level than Kinon Song. That's just one thing going in Max's favor. If I just go on Max's record now, you'll see he fought Colby Covington on his UFC debut. He got stopped there, but that was more of an overwhelming stoppage. I mean, there's no shame in losing to probably the number 2 guy in the UFC's welterweight division at the moment. And that was on his debut as well. And he still took it to round 3. So, he's fought the once interim champion in Colby on his debut. Then he's fought Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos here, a very good fighter. He took him to decision. Next fight, he beat Mike Perry. Mike Perry, say what you want about him. He's got some decent skills. I know people hate on Mike Perry, but he's not a terrible fighter. He had a lot of he had a lot of confidence in that fight as well. He was only 11-2 at the time. He's fought Curtis Millender, who's not very good. He's a Bellator fighter now, not really UFC level, but he's definitely slick on the feet. Thiago Alves, he should have won that fight, split decision. Imadaev, that was a good win. Alex Morono's a solid fighter. Obviously, he's fought Cowboy there, Oliveira, and then Ramiz Brahimaj in his last fight. But, there's some solid names there. Most of you will have heard of quite a few of the names I mentioned there, right? And he's not faring terrible against them, right? He's not faring great. I'm not saying that. But I just wanted to let everyone know that one of the things I give Max in this fight is, his experience edge. He's just been fighting better guys. We go to Kinon Song's record, and I mean, who has he been fighting, really? I mean, there's just a bunch of no ones in his first couple fights, except for Israel Adesanya when he got beat in under 2 minutes. But there's nothing wrong about that one, especially, that was probably at middleweight. But, other than Adesanya, there's just a random fighters on the regional scene. Look at their records, 33-8, 0-0. But that's nothing because that's his first 10 fights, right? So most people's records, if you check their first 10 fights, they're fighting poor guys. But let's just get once he's had 8-9 fights, then who is he fighting? Still nobody, right? Until he got into the UFC. Obviously, now he gets into UFC. Who does he fight? So he fought Brad Riddell before, which obviously that Brad Riddell's a good fighter. But now he gets into UFC, and who's he fighting? Bobby Nash. Okay, Bobby Nash, nothing special. Hector Aldana, nothing special. Alex Morono, by far the best fighter he's fought in the UFC. Got dominated for 3 rounds. It wasn't crazy, but Alex Morono clearly won that fight, put on a clinic, didn't really get touched in that fight. And, he clearly lost that fight. I will say that Max Griffin also fought Alex Morono. Now, although Alex Morono almost had Max Griffin out of there, I believe it was in round 2 by a huge head kick, Max Griffin fared a lot better in that fight other than that. So Max Griffin was making it very close on the feet other than get caught by a huge head kick. So I actually think Max performed better in that fight than Kinon Song, even though Max almost got finished, which is a bit of a weird thing to say, but, I do stand by that. And then there's 2 fights after that, Derek Krantz and Callum Potter. I mean, they're not good fighters, guys. And even in that Derek Krantz fight, he was getting taken down a hell of a lot. But Krantz seemed to gas. And, I don't think Max is going to gas here. I mean, he might do because he might have to implement a wrestling game plan. And we have seen him gas after implementing wrestling game plans before. But I do think he can keep it close on the feet. And the big thing in this fight, why I'm leaning towards Max 55%, especially for that decision, is because the takedown defense of Kinon Song is not good, guys. It's not good. And Max Griffin was never known as this wrestling guy. But in his last 5 or 6 fights, he's kind of become the wrestling guy. Apart from his last fight, he was getting takedowns on Alex Morono. He was getting takedowns on Cowboy. He was getting a lot of takedowns on Salim Imadaev. So, he's definitely adapted his MMA game in the last year or 2, and he's become much more of a takedown threat. And I believe he can implement that here against Kinon Song to get the fight to the ground. And I think he can just wear out Kinon Song. He can do damage from top position. And, I just think he can win this fight via 3-round grindy decision. Now, I will say that Kinon Song's always going to be dangerous. He's got a very solid right hand. He's got a lot of power in that hand. But, I believe Max is well-versed enough on the feet to avoid that. And Max has never been stopped. Although I have seen him hurt before more than once, but he's never been stopped. So you have to give him some credit. He's got good, even if he's not got a great chin, which he obviously does, he's definitely got good recoverability. So if Kinon Song does hurt him, I do believe he's going to be able to recover. And, I don't like betting on things that I haven't seen happen before. We have to make assumptions in this game of betting. more than one would like, right? We have to assume everything. But how can I put this? The lesser assumptions you can make, the better, right? And I don't want to assume that Max Griffin can get knocked out if he's never been knocked out before, right? And I've said that a couple times, so I am just going to check his record to make sure he hasn't been knocked out, but I'm almost certain he hasn't been knocked out. Okay, sorry. He got knocked out by Colby Covington, right? But if you actually watch that fight, it was an overwhelming performance by Colby. You know, it was more of it wasn't like he got badly hurt, stung, you know, standing and got taken out. Colby is, you know, he'll wear you down. And that was in round 3. And that was against Colby, one of the best fighters in the world, on his UFC debut. So I definitely give him a pass for that, right? Other than that, his chin's held up pretty solid. But look, Kenan Song, he hits hard. We have seen him hurt. Obviously, he can finish this fight. But I just think that the more likely outcome is that Max Griffin defeats Kenan Song, and, you know, more often than not, that comes by decision. So I think 55% of the time Max wins this by decision, and I probably lean Max in this fight about 65%, to be honest. I think Max is, you know, he's a rightful favorite. At the moment, he's minus 200. You can get Song for plus 170. And I think minus 200, it's pretty right. You know, it's fairly right. As I said, I lean Max at around 65%, and a minus 200 is an implying a probability, like what I spoke about before. The minus 200 line that is currently set for Max Griffin is implying that he wins this fight about 66% of the time. I just said I cap it about 65% for Max. So, I mean, you know, I think the line's accurate on the money line, but I think the line is a little bit inaccurate on the decision line. That's why I'm playing the decision line and not the money line, because the line is slightly inaccurate. The market is inaccurate on the decision line, in my opinion, but it's not inaccurate on the money line. So there's no value on the money line. So even though I do believe Max Griffin wins this fight 65% of the time, I'm not going to bet him because there's no edge that I'm getting on my book. It's not a plus EV bet. Boom. So that's it, all right? So Max Griffin to win via decision at plus 110 is the most inaccurate line I've seen on this card. Now, disclaimer. I haven't really meticulously gone through every single line on the card because I'll be here forever. I mean, I have done that during the week, but I haven't gone through every single under and over. I haven't gone through every single fighter to win by submission, to win by TKO, fighter to win in round 1, round 2. I haven't gone through every single thing. So there may be other inaccurate lines on the card. And I've got, at the moment, I'm just about to send my bets out to members and place them myself. I've got about 4 or 5 prop bets to bet on. I've got around 10 bets on this card, guys. And I think the lines are inaccurate on every single one of them bets. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making the bet. So, you know, I do think there's many more lines that are inaccurate on this card, but this is just one that I thought I'd give today. It's definitely an inaccurate line. I think we're getting about 7 to 8% edge on the bookies, even at the current line. And when I played it, was at plus 130, so I think I've got about an 11% edge on the bookies. So I'm happy with that bet all day, even if it loses. So that's it. That's the most inaccurate betting line on the card. Now we're going to talk about the big one, right? As I always do, we're going to be talking about the main event, Kevin Holland versus Derek Brunson. So I'm going to sip my tea and we'll talk about it. This fight's going to be good, guys. This is a banger of a fight. You know, I mean, anytime Kevin Holland steps in the octagon, it's fun, and it's definitely going to be no different here. We got Big Mouth versus Derek Brunson, and this is a clash of styles because Derek Brunson, he's not an out-and-out wrestler. I mean, there is a lot of times in his fights he likes to strike. I know he's known as a wrestler. People call him a wrestler. He definitely likes to get takedowns. But, man, he will strike with you. You know, we've seen him strike with everyone, you know. Like, he doesn't rush takedowns constantly against many people. I remember he did it against Israel Adesanya. But other than that, I mean, I've seen him, you know, I mean, he struck the whole first round, basically, with Edmund Shabazian. So, you know, he definitely is a well-rounded MMA fighter, 100%. And yeah, well, let's talk about Kevin Holland first, right? Because, you know, I want to talk about Kevin Holland. He's a talking point in this matchup, and I don't want to be disrespectful to Derek Brunson, but, you know, Kevin Holland, he had the best 2020 of any fighter, even though he didn't fight the best competition. Some people will argue that, but, You mean you can't deny what he done in 2020. His first fight in 2020, as we can see on his record here, right, was in May, right? The middle of May, the 16th of May. And he ended up having 5 fights in that year. That's crazy, you know, like, that's nuts. He fought in May. So basically, in 7 months, he had 5 fights. He's fighting more than once every 2 months, you know. Kevin Holland's a legend, and he won every single one of them fights. And out of them 5 fights, 4 of them came by stoppage. And the last one, he topped off just before Christmas by knocking out one of the veterans in the game, one of the most legendary fighters in the sport, Jacare Souza. So, I mean, you could discredit his level of competition there all you want, but, I mean, Darren Stewart, Jacare, Joaquin Buckley, I mean, Kevin Holland smashed 2020, man. A lot of 2020 smashed most people. Kevin Holland smashed 2020 and actually had the best year of his fighting career in 2020. So, you know, he's the talking point going into this matchup. Obviously, Brunson, he had a good 2020 as well. He managed to derail the hype train of Edmund Shabazian, and he'll be trying to do it again here against Kevin Holland. But make no mistake about it, Kevin Holland is the one that people will be watching this weekend. He is the one that people will be tuning in for. And rightly so, you know, they call him Big Mouth. Dana White coined the nickname Big Mouth because whenever he fights, he doesn't shut up. You know, there's a video going around on Twitter, and I haven't shared it on my Twitter, but I believe it was shared by ESPN MMA. So if you go on ESPN MMA's Twitter, you will find the video of Kevin Holland. It's like a 3-minute video of all his UFC fights, and they've basically clipped out anytime he spoke to his UFC opponents, and it's hilarious, man. Like every single fight, he's just talking so much shit, you know. And it's not so much shit like trash talking his opponent, but it's just funny stuff, you know. When Darren Stewart hits him in the balls, he's like, "Damn, Darren, like, come on, man. Like, I want to use these balls, you know. Like, I want to have at least another kid or something." And yeah, it's just funny stuff, you know. When he was on the ground against Jacare, he said, "Oh, damn, I had a dream about this before," and then knocked him out. So he's a funny dude, and, you know, all eyes are going to be on him. Skill set wise, he's got a solid skill set. You know, we can't deny it. He's good on the ground, not the best on bottom, I will say, but, you know, he does have some tricky ground game. You know, he will throw up some triangles. If he's on top, he can definitely dominate there. He's pretty heavy on top. He's very lanky, very long, very tall. So he's able to, you know, get a lot more leverage than some fighters, rain down heavy elbows. He's an exciting fighter to watch, and he's a good fighter. Obviously, where he stands out is the striking, right? That's his game. That's his realm. That's his element. That's where he wants to be. He wants to be at range, picking you apart, just like he did in the Joaquin Buckley fight. You know, that was a very, very good showcase of a Kevin Holland's perfect fight. You know, if you say what's Kevin Holland's perfect game plan to win against any fight, you'll say go watch the Joaquin Buckley fight. You know, because he stayed on the outside. He picked him apart. He frustrated him. He got Buckley rushing in, and he caught Buckley with a devastating right straight and put him out in the 3rd round when he got tired. So he's a very good fighter, a very exciting fighter. But his striking is definitely where he excels. So I will say that I definitely give him the edge on the feet and the striking, but I also will say that he needs to calm down a little bit and not be his quote-unquote usual self. And I mean, he's not going to do that, is he? Because otherwise it wouldn't be his usual self, you know? But what I mean by that is that he can't be doing these super creative strikes like he always does. Now, look, I'm not going to say don't do anything that got you to the dance. You know, you should still be creative in there and stuff. But some of the stuff I've seen him do in the octagon, it's not going to work well in this fight against Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson's a veteran of the game, and he won't be having a bar of it. You know, he won't be having a bar of these jumping hammer punches to your knee, you know, or like spinning back kick followed by like a spinning elbow. Like, you know, these crazy things that he does. He needs to be careful there because, one, he will gas himself out, and it's not good in a 5-round fight, his first 5-round fight against someone like Brunson, who's got good cardio, will keep coming, got a 3rd-round finish in his last fight. And then 2, Brunson's he's not really going to bite. I don't really think he'll bite on it. You know, I don't think he'll bite on these crazy jumping, spinning attacks. And also, 3, it can put him in bad positions. It can put Kevin Holland in bad positions if he does this. So if Kevin Holland does what he done in his last fight against Jacare Souza, which was the specific thing I'm talking about, was jumping guillotine, right? he tried to jump in guillotine Jacare. Now, I mean, why are you doing that against someone like Jacare? Jacare is one of the best jiu-jitsu players we've seen in the sport. And, although he's getting on, he's still not really, I doubt he's going to get jumping guillotined. I mean, the day Jacare gets jumping guillotine is the day Jacare needs to retire, man, because, that was a bit of a silly move, in my opinion. Poor fight IQ by Kevin Holland. He ended up on bottom. Luckily, I don't want to say luckily because he threw the shot. He ended up getting a KO from bottom. But how often that's going to happen? I put a little breakdown of this fight out on my Instagram earlier. And if any of you haven't followed me on Instagram, definitely do that because I put a lot of good jewels there, a lot of good sports betting nuggets. And sometimes I'll break down fights and stuff that I don't do on this podcast. So go follow me on Instagram at Lucrative MMA. And the same thing on Twitter. I put a lot of good info out and good commentary on Twitter. So follow me on Twitter at Lucrative MMA. But I put the breakdown out on my Twitter, right? And I said, on my Instagram. And I said that if Jacare and Holland fought 100 times, that knockout that Holland done, it happens once, It doesn't happen more than once. It's a 1% outcome. It's an outlier. So it's kind of it's amazing because we got that meme moment, that viral moment, and it's very good to watch. And it was, jump out of your chair shit when it happened. I was going crazy. But I would have liked to see that fight play out a little bit longer because, Jacare was able to get the takedown really easy. Kevin Holland showed silly fight IQ, in my opinion, by jumping, guillotining him. And it would have been good to see him against someone like Jacare who would consistently go for takedowns in this fight. But, I guess we probably wouldn't be getting the lines we're getting now if that fight happened. So I'm not actually having a bet on this fight. But, for those of you who are, you're probably happy that happened because you feel like you've got value at some point. And that's probably a lot in part to to how the fight played out. But breaking down this fight, exactly how it happens and what's going to happen, I'll conclude here. This fight really comes down to the takedown defense and the get-up ability of Holland, in my opinion. Unless Holland catches Derek Brunson cold in the first round, which is definitely possible because Derek Brunson is no stranger to losing in the first round. He's no stranger to winning in the first round. He's lost in the first round many times. I'll just bring up his record here. His last loss was in the first round against Israel Adesanya. The loss before that, the fight before that, was a loss in the first round against Jacare. And then you can go back to the Robert Whittaker fight in 2016 where he got knocked out in the first round. You can go back to the first Jacare fight where he lost in the first round. So he's lost in the first round quite often. But, it hasn't happened for at least the last 4 fights. And that 4th fight was against the champion, the division's best. So it's not, it's nothing to be ashamed of there. And, if Kevin Holland doesn't get him out in there in the first round, which, I'd say he probably won't, then we're going to see what Kevin Holland is made of because Derek Brunson's not going to go away. He's going to keep coming and he's going to keep being, relentless with the takedowns. He's got a very solid jab. He likes to jab his way into range. He's got a lot of power behind his jab. He's got a lot of power in general, You've seen him hurt guys. He hurt Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker before he got put away by him. And he definitely can hurt Holland here. Holland has never been stopped by strikes, so that's one thing we have to think of. He's definitely got a solid chin. That definitely goes for his favor because if he does get cracked, he might not get hugely discouraged like some of Brunson's opponents have been in the past. And Brunson is going to test his takedown defense, and I don't think his takedown defense is going to hold up well. It hasn't held up well in many other fights, but I will say that his first round takedown defense is a hell of a lot better than his second, third, and fourth round takedown defense. Now, I haven't seen his fourth round takedown defense, but it's not going to be any better than his third round takedown defense. And his third round takedown defense isn't that great. So, I'm sure he's been working harder here, Kevin Holland, because it's a 25-minute fight, but it's weird because I have to edge Brunson in the skill set, the experience, the MMA game, just because of the wrestling it's such a big disparity, whereas the striking is a big disparity, but probably not as much as the wrestling. Kevin Holland always gets taken down, always has trouble with the takedowns. I can't imagine he's dramatically improved his takedown defense in the last year or so, or last 6 months when he fought Darren Stewart. But he did get taken down a lot by Darren Stewart, but that was in the third round when he was gassed. So I do think cardio is a big thing when it comes to Kevin Holland's takedown defense. A lot of people say Kevin Holland has bad takedown defense. I do think cardio plays a big part in his takedown defense. So that is a caveat there. But, So as I was going to say, I do lean Brunson in this fight just in regards to the skill set and stuff, but I just have a feeling Kevin Holland's going to do it, man. And maybe I'm getting, taken in by the hype of Kevin Holland, his 5-fight winning streak, Mr. Big Mouth and stuff. But I just have a feeling he's going to do it. Now, look, in sports betting, we don't give a fuck about feelings, right? I've had feelings things are going to happen many, many times before, and they don't happen. It's kind of like dreams, I always dream about fights. I remember one vivid dream I have. It was about a boxing fight. Daniel Dubois, who's a UK boxer. I dreamt of him getting knocked out by Nathan Gorman, right? They ended up fighting. So that was like during fight week, right? I didn't put any money on it because I didn't think that it would happen, but I dreamt that it happened, right? But when it happened, the fight I'm talking about, Daniel Dubois knocked him out in 6 rounds. So, in my dream, he got knocked out. But in the real thing, he got knocked out in 6 rounds. And there's been a lot of times I've had a feeling something was going to happen. And it fucking doesn't happen, So you have to be worry about feelings. But, there's been a lot of times when I have had feelings and stuff has happened, gone against the grain. Like I had a feeling Fabricio Verdun was just going to submit Alexander Gustafsson. And, he was a huge underdog there, like plus 275. And it happened, I had a feeling Jan Blachowicz was going to beat Dominic Reyes, and he did. He was a big underdog there. So, yeah, I believe feelings are kind of bullshit. Sometimes they put, sometimes they come true and sometimes they don't. So basically, it doesn't matter. That means, right? It's just 50-50. But with that being said, I just have a feeling Kevin Holland's going to do it here. But if they fought 100 times, I'm going to say Brunson wins a little bit more often than not. Now, the last thing I want to say is that I don't just have this, weird mystical feeling. The reason why I can't get behind a Brunson bet, even though I maybe do favor him a little bit in the skill set and just the overall MMA fighter he is that I don't really know where his chin's at. I don't think he's got a bad chin, but I think he's vulnerable. I think he's fragile. It's really weird. I feel like his chin's decent, but we've seen him get stopped in the first round so many times. It's not just like once or twice he got caught cold. We've seen him get stopped in the first round many times that I just don't know how his chin's going to hold up when Kevin Holland lands on it because, disclaimer, I really think Kevin Holland's going to land on it. And I think he's going to land hard. And I think he's going to land accurate. And I think he's going to land powerful, man. I think Kevin Holland is going to land that straight right hand with laser-like precision. And I don't know if Brunson's going to be able to take that, So that's what's keeping me off a bet on Brunson. But I don't hate anyone taking a shot. I think if you want to play this straight, I believe that Brunson is probably the best play. I believe that's how you should be playing it. I believe that's where the value is at that plus number. I believe if you want to play Kevin Holland, probably playing his TKO line is better than playing his straight money line. I don't really like him much as a minus 175 favorite. Level of competition is drastically better for Derek Brunson, and he is taking a step down in competition in regards to his previous losses anyway, right? He's definitely not taking a step down in his competition in regards to, Elias Theodorou. But, Ian Heinisch could argue he's a higher level than Kevin Holland. Who knows? Probably is. I don't know. Edmund Shabazian, we don't know how good he is, but he's a very, very bad gasser. So, I don't really include him here. And that's it, guys. I'm going to make a final prediction. And look, this is crazy. Don't hate me for this prediction. I just have a feeling it's going to happen. I don't know about Brunson's chin, so I'm going to fade Brunson's chin here. But as I say, I do believe that Derek Brunson wins this fight probably more often than his line suggests. So there is some line value on Brunson, in my opinion. But my official prediction, this is not a betting prediction or, what you should bet on. It's just my prediction on who I think is going to win the fight. And it is Kevin Holland via TKO KO in round 2. Right. Can't believe I'm saying that. Forgive me for saying that. And look, don't be surprised if I change my pick before fight time. But yeah, that's my final prediction. So that's it, guys. We wrapped up another edition of the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast. Any of you have stuck around this far, if you are on YouTube, please like the video. It does help a ton. We're just growing at the moment. So just one thumbs up from you will do a lot for the channel. And, anybody who's listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast or Google Podcast, I appreciate you listening to this. I won't stop. I will be back every single week. And as I said, I'll probably be putting the video out, the podcast out earlier in the week. So any of you haven't subscribed to me on YouTube, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, as I said, and subscribe to me on the podcast platforms as well, so you can see when I upload a podcast. There may be times where I do podcasts that are not on YouTube, that I only upload on Spotify or Apple, just the podcast realm in general. So just to go over the card one more time, the first fight we spoke about was the most exciting fight of the card. Leonardo Santos versus Grant Dawson. And I predicted Grant Dawson to win via third round TKO via ground and pound. The next fight we spoke about was Max Griffin to win, to fight Kinon Song. And this was the most inaccurate line on the betting card. And that was Max Griffin to win via decision at plus 110. I believe it should be capped at about 55%. It's currently capped at 47%. I think it should be minus 125. It's like plus 110. The next fight we spoke about, the fight we just spoke about, Kevin Holland versus Brunson. I believe Brunson's going to probably get beat by Kevin Holland. Kevin Holland will win via TKO in round 2. So that's it for today, guys. I will catch up with anyone who has spoken on the chat in 1 second. But for now, I appreciate you listening to the Lucrative MMA Betting Podcast, and I will see you next week. And now, let's catch up with the chat. Anyone in the chat still here, light up the chat. Let me know if you thought the podcast was good. Let me know if you thought I was talking shit on some of them bets. Let me know if you think that the other fighter's going to win. Do you think Brunson's going to win? Do you think Song's going to win? Whatever. We got Bruce KO saying, I think putting your podcast out as early as possible is an excellent idea. Serious bettors would really appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much, Bruce. Appreciate that. Appreciate you being here. Yes, I'm going to start doing that, man. I'm definitely going to start doing that, because then we can take advantage of better lines as well, which is obviously always good. Some of the lines that I got earlier in the week that I sent to my members are way different than now. They're way different. So I will try and get this podcast out earlier next week. Starting from next week, I will try. Jamai, is that Jamai? Yeah, Jamai Khan is saying, keep doing your thing. You are one of the best I've heard breaking down fights. Very knowledgeable. Appreciate that, my guy. I appreciate that. Thanks for listening. I will keep doing my thing. I will keep on keeping on. And yeah, I'm not going to stop. Subscribe so you can find all my videos, which I will be uploading in the future. So I think that's it, guys. No more chats in the chat. So I'm going to get out of here. But it was fun. Thanks for chopping it up. Thanks for listening. Anyone, again, who's listening to this, hit the like. And yeah, man, I will be putting more videos out. Might even put another video out before fight time. So stay tuned. But if not, see you.